So I've got a question from Kaspars, and the question is, when talking about pre-sleep protein, which we've mentioned on the show several times before, the question is, are we talking about 20 or 30 minutes before bed with the protein ingestion, or are we talking about 2 or 3 hours before bed? And what they're getting at is they're based on the question, they're a little concerned about this idea of pre-bed food intake interfering with sleep quality, because our stomach can get upset, body temperature can be elevated due to digestion, which can be unfavorable for sleep. You want to kind of get your core temperature down a little bit for sleep. So is it really worth sacrificing sleep quality in order to promote muscle protein synthesis? So as I've mentioned on previous episodes, I think we've talked about it on the show. I'm not convinced that the pre-bed feeding opportunity is a unique opportunity. I think as long as you're getting ideally somewhere between 3 to 6 servings of protein throughout the day, I don't think it's critical to have one of those be 20 minutes before bed or 2 hours before bed. I just simply don't think it matters based on the evidence available. Now, the question about that trade-off of, let's say it's late at night and you're like, I've only gotten a couple protein feedings in. Should I go for it, or should I be worried about interfering with sleep? The question was, what do the studies actually do? If you're looking at the studies that look at nighttime proteins specifically impacting body composition, those do provide protein relatively close to bedtime. So the most common approach that you'll see in that small collection of studies is going to be a protein shake. So it'll be a liquid form of protein given somewhere between 30 to 90 minutes before bed, somewhere in that time frame. The problem is with those studies, because they're so focused on body composition, they really don't say much about how it impacted sleep quality. It's kind of up in the air. There are a couple studies I've reviewed over the past couple years in mass that have looked at pre-bed protein, different types of protein with different amounts of tryptophan and how those might influence sleep. Because tryptophan is a precursor to serotonin and melatonin. And so having elevated tryptophan in the brain at night could theoretically promote, quicker onset of sleep in addition to better sleep quality. So for those studies where they actually looked at sleep quality, they did have it kind of further away from bedtime. We're talking about like 2 or 3 hours before bed. So while those studies give us an opportunity to look at how this protein is impacting sleep quality, unfortunately, it's pretty far removed from sleep time. Like I said, a couple hours at minimum. And so it doesn't really get to the root of this question, which is like, should I chug a protein shake right before bed, or is that going to mess up my sleep? So the research available, unfortunately, it kind of takes one of two approaches so far, which is either put it close to bed and don't measure sleep quality, or put it further from bed and do measure sleep quality. And I don't think that's intentional. I think that's just the way it goes when you're looking at a body of literature that is very small, and they haven't really had an opportunity to test through all different permutations of timing and outcome measurements. So I, for now, would recommend just using a little bit of trial and error. I think a lot of times sleep disruption related to pre-bed meal intake can be really complicated. So you want to go to bed. You certainly don't want to be too hungry, because that can interfere with sleep for sure. Just ask any bodybuilder. That becomes one of the hardest things in prep, in my opinion, is trying to sleep when hungry. But you also don't want to be too full. That can be uncomfortable, and like the question suggests, you can have that discomfort of digestion, elevated body temperature, things like that. So you want to be not too hungry, not too full, but you also have to consider, what does this meal look like? So some of these studies, they'll just give a liquid protein shake, very, very easy to digest. And that's quite different from a very unprocessed meal with a bunch of fat in it, a bunch of fiber intake. So the things that often disrupt sleep when consumed before bed, usually a fatty meal, especially if it tends to be pretty spicy, that is not a good combination for a pre-bed meal that would support really good sleep. But I think a lot of this is very susceptible to variation between individuals. I think you probably want to do some trial and error, see if a particular pre-bed meal disrupts your sleep. If it does, you might go for something that's more digestible. You know, you might change up your food sources, or you might change the timing. And like I've said previously, if you decide to just move that pre-bed meal to way earlier and kind of miss out on that feeding opportunity immediately before sleep, I really don't think you're sacrificing much in the process.